Before we get to our in-studio guest, Miranda Devine, fresh off an interview with the President of the United States, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
So hopefully Elon figures it out, comes back into the fold. The president doesn't think that he needs to be in a blood feud with Elon Musk. And I actually think if Elon chilled out a little bit, everything would be fine.
Right. Musk flat out admits he went too far in some of his posts against Trump and Trump world. What that means for the two titans.
Number 2.
We have reached a framework to implement the Geneva Consensus. So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. We're going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it.
And they've left London, and that is Howard Lutnick, along with Scott Bessent, who, along with Jameson Greer, have left their meetings with very productive meetings with China. They have come to a handshake deal in London, as you just heard. What it means and will it hold?
Number 1.
Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation.
Day 5 of the Los Angeles riots, and Newsom decides anarchy is to be blamed on the man who brought law enforcement to the streets. Make sense of that. Any hope of Newsom jogging to the center in order to get the Democratic nomination in a couple of years is pretty much by the boards. He wants to be the adversary of Trump. The American people think illegal immigration, not too good. We'll see where he stands. Miranda Devine, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Of course, the New York Post. I want to get to your interview, but I just want to get your take on the riots and the president's reaction to them, and that is to send 4,000 National Guard and 700 Marines without asking the governor.
Well, look, I mean, the LAPD and the commissioner there said he was overwhelmed, and they're grateful for the National Guard backup. And, ICE agents were under threat, and Karen Bass, the mayor, was not protecting them. The commissioner of the LAPD in the beginning said, we are not going to be involved in these ICE immigration roundups. And so you see the violence, you see the rocks being thrown, you see these masked invaders running around with foreign flags, setting fire to cars, attacking law enforcement. This could easily get out of control. And I think Donald Trump learned from the Summer of Love when he said he sort of thought, well, I'll let the governors make the decisions. But the governors in these blue states did not make decisions, either because they're weak and they don't want to alienate their constituencies, or because they actually think this is a way to hurt Trump. Maybe they think that they won the 2020 election because of those riots, or they were helped by the chaos that ensued and the sort of appearance of a president, a law and order president who was unable to stop them. Donald Trump's not going to let that happen again, and he's so fierce about it and very energized because he knows that the American people want this done.
So, Gavin Newsom wants to be the adversary of Trump. He sees advantages to taking that on. He wants to be the tough guy. Now, he sees the unrest, but he says Trump is to blame. Cut 12.
He chose more force. He chose theatrics over public safety. He federalized another 2,000 Guard members. He deployed more than 700 active U.S. Marines. These are the men and women trained for foreign combat, not domestic law enforcement. We honor their service. We honor their bravery. But we do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces. Not in L.A., not in California, not anywhere.
Well, they are. I'm not sure what the Marines are going to be able to do and with rules of engagement, but it's up to the National Guard to guard federal buildings, which are full of expletives, and they've been graffitied, and they tried to get into the detention center.
Well, I mean, they were attacking the LAPD headquarters. They smashed rocks into the windows. They won't stop, as Kamala Harris said. They won't stop, and they shouldn't stop. And Democrat leaders around the country are encouraging this. They're emboldening the protesters, so-called, the rioters, and pretending, on the media we have a lot, MSNBC, CNN are calling these rallies mostly peaceful. They haven't learned the lessons of 2020.
You shut down a rally, or do you shut down the 101 freeway? freeway with a rally?
Yeah, you throw rocks at police cars and injure police officers with a rally? No. These are professional insurgents, professional anarchists. And you can see the way they move, their masks. We saw it in New York back in, 2020. We saw it across the country. It was frightening. People don't want that kind of mayhem to ensue again. And thankfully, this time, Donald Trump is just going to use the power that he has. The president has that power. And he's nipped it in the bud up to a point. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. And Gavin Newsom, I mean, that was the weirdest video. Totally projecting. His eyes are not saying what his mouth is saying. He knows he's lying. And
You're talking about last night.
Last night, Gavin Newsom came out with that, and the audio was all wrong. And he's trying to be a statesman, and he's trying to sort of thread the needle, knowing that his constituents in LA want law and order. They're frightened. They are thankful that the National Guard have come for the most part. But yet he's trying for the presidential primary, so he's got to appeal to the left.
There are groups like the Coalition for Humane Immigration Rights that get money from the DHS. There's homeless nonprofit groups handing off bags of PPE, along with Operation Healthy Heart, LA Poverty Department. A lot of these NGOs are financed by the federal government. What are they doing? Why are they a part of this unrest?
Financed by the federal government, and they also give donations to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and other sort of lefty leaders.
How could that be? I mean, how could that?
It's federal government money, and it's going into the Democrat Party coffers to enable this kind of lawlessness. And the NGOs you saw with the border, the NGOs are an arm of the left. That's all they are. They are, and they're staffed by Marxists, radical people who want a kind of revolution in the country to overthrow the powers that be.
Which I'm pretty much against that. You have a brand new podcast, Podforce One, and you spoke to President Trump as your first guest. Here he talked to you about the LA riots, Cut 41.
So why are the Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, why are they objecting to the National Guard? I mean, they're saying that you provoked the riots. Gavin Newsom called you a stone-cold liar. He said you talked on the phone. You never mentioned anything about deploying the troops.
Of course I did. I mean, the phone call was to deploy the troops. It was late at night. I said, your city's burning down. Your state is in bad trouble. You got to get the troops. Why would I call him at that time?
He said it was a setup. What's he on about?
A setup for what? Because he's not putting in the troops? All I want him to do is do a good job. I'd rather have him do a good job than a bad job, even though politically I guess you could take the other extreme.
So your reaction, where was that taking place, in the Oval Office?
No, actually, he chose the library in the White House, but beautiful room, book lined.
On video too?
On video, yep. And he was very generous with his time, gave us 45 minutes, and was very open about everything from, Camp David, the riots, his feelings about Joe Biden, the auto pen. He knows how the auto pen, how you can tell for a fake signature. Also about his childhood, his musical genius. He was tested for aptitude, being bundled off to military school at 13. Talked a bit about his kids, about John Jr. I asked about his presidential aspirations. He said all his kids could go into politics and do really well. And he also divulged the musical instrument that he played when he was a child.
Right. Here he is talking about his musical genius, Cut 43.
But when you were little, you were found to be have a musical genius.
That's right. They said my father and mother took me to a place, like an aptitude place, to see what I would be good at, what I liked, and what my talent was at pretty young, like probably 11 or 12. And I went through this process for a couple of days, and they came up to my father. They said, "Your son is brilliant at music. He'd be an incredible musician. This is not what my father wanted to hear. This was not the greatest thing. But I do have an ear for music.
Yes.
I mean, I really, I think music has played a big role. I play great music. People like the music I play. But it was funny because my father would not have thought about music for me.
He's not, yeah, Dad was pretty much his business guy. So what instruments?
Well, it turned out it was the flute. His mother made him do flute lessons, and he laughs about it now. I mean, it's hard to imagine Donald Trump with that very delicate instrument, but he said he didn't like it very much. But he still loves music. He plays in
He's DJ.
He's a DJ, yeah, Bedminster and at all his properties. And his rallies, he chose every song. But upstairs at the residence, he says he's playing Elton John at the moment. He loves Elton John.
More with Miranda Devine in a moment. When we come back, I want to talk about this trade deal and so how it developed with China. She's got great insight on it, and it was just formalized or the framework agreed upon about an hour ago. Don't move. You're watching Brian Kilmeade Show. Watching and listening to the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Negotiating a trade deal. You've managed to do that with
We have. We're doing great, but there's only so many deals you can do because we have, let's say, 170 countries that we do business with. That's a lot. And you don't want to do deals with 170. I mean, you go absolutely semi-crazy, right? What we do is, at a certain point, we're going to just set the terms of the deal, and those people are going to pay those terms.
So President Trump talking about the trade deals. It looks like Mexico, by the way, according to the Wall Street Journal, could be next. But the one that's framed out is China. Can you want to go over, Miranda, what you know about the China deal?
Yeah, so Howard Lutnick just said that basically at midnight London time, they finished their talks, 2 days of talks, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, going for 12 hours. Very passionate on the Chinese side. I heard from someone else that, there was a lot of thumping and shouting from the Chinese side. But in the end, they got what they wanted, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, and Jamison Greer, which was China had basically stopped shipments of this special magnet that's inside every single motor in America, could have stopped everything. And that was China playing hardball against America to get Donald Trump to drop his tariffs. Well, he hasn't dropped his tariffs, and China has agreed at the end of these 2-day talks that they'll let the magnets free again because America every week was doing something equally vicious back. That was what Donald Trump had ordered. For instance, Honeywell and all these companies were not sending any aircraft parts to China. So from what I understand, 250 planes are already grounded. They were being grounded at the rate of 250 a week. Their entire fleet was going to be on the ground soon. And then, Marco Rubio's in there saying we're not going to take your students. And Scott Bessent was subpoenaing all the Chinese banks. So
what were they looking for in subpoenaing the banks?
Well, look, if you subpoena any bank, you might find something. If you subpoena a Chinese bank, I know this from the Hunter Biden laptop investigation, you're going to find a lot of grift, a lot of fraud.
Well, will they ever be transparent? If you subpoena a Chinese bank, do they give you records?
Well, if they don't, you can then put on international sanctions on them where they just cannot do business. So the Chinese don't want that. This was a concerted kind of ratcheting effort of pain delivered by the president. And, various levels of pain, they kept on ratcheting up. And I think President Xi just called uncle. He and Donald Trump have a call last week, and that was why Donald Trump dispatched those three to London, to this neutral area. Keir Starmer gave them some beautiful sort of palatial building near St James's Palace where they did these 2 days of trade talks. And in the end, I mean, it was willing, but the Chinese kept on quoting the conversation between President Xi and President Trump. That was the framework, and it was basically President Trump was playing kind of the good cop to the bad cop of his negotiators and saying, look, President Xi, we want to be friends, we want to do business with you, etc. But the tariffs are still there. So it's a base 10% tariff, which, Donald Trump thinks that China is just going to wear.
I just think it's pretty amazing because now the students can come again. But we also know the students are really told to spy.
Yeah.
Their families are left back home, so they go to Harvard, they go to Yale, they go to small colleges. They come in, they pay full freight. Colleges love it. They went to Purdue. I was talking to Mitch Daniels the other day. He was like, I was president of Purdue. We know there was a Chinese presence, but we also know that if it's tough for them to go into the research, be a part of the research, they're obligated to give the Chinese government the money, the information, and their families are left behind. That's why they're pretty secure. In the backdrop, Miranda, we know a third Chinese national accused of smuggling biological material into the country, picked up by the University of Michigan. We know another official. They denied a U.S. visa and wiped her phone days before traveling to Detroit. This is another woman that was doing something connected to the university who were accused of smuggling a dangerous agricultural pathogen. The other one was a fungus. So they're doing diabolical things in real time.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that frightening? Fantastic work.
One's from Wuhan. This
Wuhan, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it looks like deliberate ecological terrorism by China against America, perhaps as part of their threats over the tariffs. And, it's an echo of 2020. Remember, Donald Trump did that really tough trade deal with China. I think he slapped a 30% tariff on their goods. Phase one, exactly. And, that was a huge win for America, very embarrassing for China. And shortly after that, the Wuhan virus. Now, I'm not saying there's any evidence to say that China deliberately released it, but it was certainly a pretty good way of getting Donald Trump back in his box and eventually caused him to lose the election.
And Miranda, Devine, we have a parade on Saturday, and it was like Donald Trump, and you heard Newsom last night, has a parade for his birthday. People should understand the facts are the facts. The Army asked Joe Biden for a parade to commemorate their 250th birthday, which was 1775. Remember, we needed an army to fight before we declared war with Bunker Hill and with Lexington and Concord. And they said, okay, but make it small. It was going to be 300 people in the city, General George. When Biden loses, they ask Trump. Trump's like, we're going to make it big.
Yeah.
It wasn't Trump's idea. It is his birthday. It is Flag Day. It is Saturday. It all worked out.
Yes, it worked out. It was providential. And how embarrassing to have some tiny parade. If you're going to have a parade,
of course,
you have to do it big. I mean, China has these massive parades. It's a show of strength to your adversaries. It's the mightiest army in the world. Donald Trump is bringing it back. He's got the woke out of the military. There's a lot of pride back. They
brought the base names back.
They brought the base. That was fantastic. Yeah, Fort Bragg, etc., Fort Lee. So, look, I think it'll be a real moment of pride for America, and it's part of the 250th anniversary celebrations, which kick off next July. And it's going to be a year, I think, that is going to really invigorate patriotism and pride in the country, optimism. Hopefully the economy will be doing well.
Miranda, congratulations. Pod Force One.
There is graffiti behind where these officers are that says F Trump, other graffiti. They are clearly trying to keep everybody out of this federal building. But the mood in the crowd is getting more agitated as that curfew comes close. The smell of weed is in the air. People are not looking at all, Abby, like they are going to abide by this curfew.
Yep, and it was from 8 to 6 in the morning, and they didn't. They also blocked the 101 freeway. That was a CNN national correspondent, just so in case you couldn't make out what said behind him, it did say F Trump. Oh, some reason that doesn't seem to get off those walls. I guess it's that stubborn paint. They just don't have the right chemical compound in order to get rid of that. But if it's up to Karen Bass, it would be up to you to get rid of it, because there's a big mess that we have to clean up for the Olympics and for the World Cup. Martha MacCallum, will you have, as anchor of the story, will you have any time to help Karen Bass clean up the city?
Yeah, you're going to get out there with your scrub brush.
I have two sponges.
Clean up the city. There's nothing worse than a city that is layered with graffiti everywhere. And the looting, to me, is one of the most just horrific sights, to watch someone's business, these people just breaking in the windows, and you have people outside, some of them, don't do that. They're worried about the reputation of the protest while these people run. So it is just a really sad, destructive environment that we have watched unfold over the last several days in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but it's not just L.A. Now there was some riots over in Denver, some riots in San Antonio, a little bit of demonstrations in Austin, New York, Philadelphia. And they say that there's going to be demonstrations over the weekend. My sense is going to be organized. So what is the theme And we're going to support illegal immigrants? Is that the theme? We have to support people who came here illegally.
So here's what's so out of step, right? And here's where when I listen to Maxine Waters, it's almost like she has this reflexive reaction to everything. She goes to the same place, right? It's race. We need to protest more, and get up in their faces. All of this kind of stuff, right? Hillary Clinton jumped on board as well. These are peaceful protests. Are there some peaceful protests happening? Absolutely. But what is the overriding images and frightening? You see reporters out there dodging pieces of concrete. This is a seriously dangerous situation that's unfolding. But what they're not getting is that 66% of immigrant citizens think that people who are here illegally should be removed. There is no big, broad social momentum on social media or in the public domain that is supportive of these actions. And I think about Jay Johnson, right? And I believe it was on your show in the morning a while ago, probably 2 years ago now, saying that the illegal immigration levels were unsustainable. And I remember thinking, well, what does that look like? Now we know what it looks like.
Yeah. Because we've had millions come in here over the last 4 years.
That's right.
And they go right to L.A. Why? You get free social services. A lot of times you get free school. They were talking about giving them college grants.
Driver's licenses.
Right, driver's license. There's no discrimination.
Yeah, and you threaten to take that away and send someone back to their home country, they're going to be pissed.
Right.
They're going to be like, wait, what? I came here and I was promised all these things, right? And when
they're flying Mexican flags. They're holding.
Absolutely. No, nothing inflames me more than the waving of Mexican flags. It's like, what do you have wrong here? If you're claiming that you have a right to be in America and you don't like the way things are going down, you better wave an American flag and you better complain about your version of the oppression that is happening to you. And this is not the America that you believe should be happening. If you're going to wave a Mexican flag, you got a one-way ticket home. Go back.
Absolutely.
Go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way these immigrant citizens are seeing it as well, based on the polling that we're seeing.
So here's the one thing that I have questions, and one thing that's really hurting us, the lack of coordination. The LAPD is told we will not work with ICE. So the National Guard is being told, we don't want the National Guard there. I didn't call and communicate. Well, how can you have a coordinated answer from Highway Patrol, LAPD, National Guard, ICE officials? How can you possibly coordinate when they go out of their way to not coordinate?
Honestly, it would really make Gavin Newsom look good right now if he said, you know what? I didn't want to take this to this level, but since we have these individuals from the National Guard and the Marines coming in as well, the most important thing is that there is coordination between them. I want them to go back. I don't want them here. I want to, get control of my National Guard again, which is one of the most pathetic things that a governor should ever have to ask the federal government. Can I please have control of my National Guard back? But the issue is that kind of coordination is where people are going to get hurt, right? So he needs to take the higher ground and allow coordination, encourage coordination until they can get this behind them.
Aaron Cohen, Israeli special ops, says this is what he observed. Cut 22.
The leadership failure put these officers in risk, and that's the personal problem I have here. There was no unified command structure. Bass was micromanaging field decisions from City Hall, which breaks protocol. You had incident commanders, Sean, waiting on political clearance before moving teams, and that kind of interference delays reactions and gets cops killed. And in that dynamic crowd, seconds matter.
And guess what? They waited, 35 to 55 minutes to help out ICE officials.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's the danger that exists when you have that lack of communication. Nobody wants to see any of this end in one of these officers losing their lives. And that has to be of the utmost importance to anyone who considers themselves a leader in this situation. Grow up.
Martha MacCallum is going to be here a little while longer. She's going to be talking about what's on her show shortly, as well as a trade deal that's just been framed out with China.
I think what happens is when you put President Xi and President Trump on the phone together, it changes the outcome. They were focused on trying to deliver on what President Xi told President Trump. And I think obviously Ambassador Greer, myself, and Secretary Bessent were completely focused on delivering what President Trump wanted from us. So I think both sides had extra impetus in order to get things done, because we both have our presidents behind us, pushing us to make sure we take care of our respective sides.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick talking about a deal that was framed out with China, at which point we get the rare earth picked up right away, they say, and it's going to help with tech and military. They get to bring their students here to continue to spy on us and I guess bring in poisonous fungus. And we also, I assume, give them a little bit of leeway when it comes to these NVIDIA chips that we're trying to hold back because they were using it for weapons.
Yeah, the last time around when they had, and remember, this is not obviously this is progress, but this is just an agreement to go back to the 90-day truce period. So this is not a finalized trade deal, but it's a step in the right direction. But it's a very complicated situation, and it makes you wonder how long before we're right back where we started, unless we change the dynamic where we can, we can't just suddenly find rare earth minerals. And we need these materials for technology. The magnet issue is a huge issue. Just, for people who want to understand how much it's required in our defense equipment, think about the fact that it's a magnet basically that takes your steering wheel in your car back to neutral. Right. So it evens out that's all magnets that are required for that kind of technology in your car. So magnify that by a lot to determine what the needs are for our defense industry. We have gone down this road so far of not being able to supply ourselves with what we need for defense and pharmaceuticals. And we got to inch it back. But, we have to do what's necessary to make a deal in the meantime so that we don't suffer too much loss in the gap.
Right. And we know this. The Mexico deal looks like it's close to being done, according to the Wall Street Journal, where tariffs go back to the level they were before the president had his Liberation Day. And we heard a couple of days ago from, I think it was Jameson Greer, that said that India, there's just a few things to iron out. So that would certainly make progress. What did hurt, and I got confirmation on this from someone at the White House, that when that court case was decided, that they said, well, we don't think President Trump has got the ability to put these tariffs on these countries without congressional approval. That immediately gave all our negotiating partners, the EU and others, their adversaries, they said, wait, you might not even, I don't even have to cut a good deal.
Right.
Now it's been stayed. Now they're going to decide maybe tomorrow about that. That really upended negotiations.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, that is the check and balance system that exists in the country. But I think this president, time and time again, is more willing to ask for forgiveness than permission. And he wants to move forward at a really rapid pace on all of these things and rather deal with it in the courts down the road. The other issue that we're still seeing play out here with the trade barriers is the impact on companies. And I think that, economists are probably right when they say that the real impact of it won't really be felt until the summer. Not to say that it's not a good idea to reorganize these relationships, but we do have to recognize we had, an inflation number that ticked up a little bit today, and the markets were kind of hesitant to take off on this Chinese deal this morning, mostly because they're a little concerned about the supply chain and the impact of it on manufacturers across the country over the summer.
Yeah, here's what Ed Lawrence asked Howard Lutnick, cut 33.
I think what happens is when you put President Xi and President Trump on the phone together, it changes the outcome. They were focused on trying to deliver on what President Xi told President Trump. And I think obviously Ambassador Greer, myself, and Secretary Bessent were completely focused on delivering what President Trump wanted from us.
There you go. Cut 34 is Jameson Greer with Ed Lawrence.
Is there enforcement in this deal?
As long as Donald Trump's the president, there's going to be enforcement. Just trust me on that.
Well, that's a really good answer. I love that answer.
Yeah, I don't know. But the thing is, they dropped the ball on phase one when we changed presidents, and they didn't do anything after Geneva. So that's what brought us London.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying earlier about this is a truce period for 90 days with China. The longer term issues about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, finding other supply chains. But that's exactly what China doesn't want, right? It's a rock and a hard place because China, after the first deal in Geneva, suddenly China was accusing us of not giving them the chips that we had promised, of discouraging American companies from buying Chinese equipment. They didn't like that. They really want their students to be able to come to school here, which I find very interesting when you think about what you mentioned before about this fungus that came in plastic bags to a Chinese student who wants to study it in the labs at the University of Michigan. So it's unfortunate to be in the situation where we have to negotiate with China over any of this, but that's where we are.
That's where we are. We're also got to look at this situation. China's trade with the U.S. is down 35%, number one. Number two is they got a huge housing issue. It's beyond reproach. They can't hold it back. The people have so little of a social safety net, they will not spend. So they're not consumers of their own products.
That's exactly right.
So this is a huge issue. You could build tankers and you could build nuclear weapons, but if people aren't working and the ones that aren't working, there's a whole generation that are between 18 and 34 that just don't have jobs. It's just not worth it for them, let alone the ones who've been laid off or no pay increases.
And then you have to worry if you're, a true authoritarian leader like President Xi Jinping about unrest, because that's where unrest is fomented. You've got young men age 18 to 34 who don't have a job, who don't have income, who can't buy stuff. You got a problem on your hands. So that's really his major, that and the 30% drop, as you just pointed out, of Chinese goods coming into the United States. You got to wonder if we can find a way to live without that 30% permanently, because you have to do it in increments. You have to decouple. I mean,
you have to.
I know we're not talking in terms of that right now in these trade negotiations, but that has to be the goal for our country, because China wants to dominate us. They want to eliminate our power position in the world. So we can never have that not in the front of our minds as we look at these. And it's just a tricky. It's not where I think either side really wants to be at this moment, but there's a lot at stake, so they have to work out an interim deal.
Yeah, I mean, all these deals should be coming. The one thing, Peter Navarro looks terrible. 90 deals in 90 days. How's that gone? Howard Lutnick, we got a whole bunch of deals ready to go. How is that gone? So you don't promise things you can't do. There are probably a lot of deals that are close to being done, but you shouldn't be saying things that clearly aren't true. And I notice Peter Navarro has been invisible, thank goodness.
Yeah.
He's a terrible spokesperson for this. His ideas were probably written in 1980, and he was mostly a Democrat most of his career, right?
That's true. And I mean, you do have to be careful, obviously, when you promise things like 90 deals in 90 days, and you've got one, and maybe 1.5. We've got UK. And we have a truce, a 90-day period with China, obviously the most important deal of all.
Right. I want you to understand what's going on with Elon Musk and to tell everyone yesterday there seems to be a walk back with Elon Musk as he's reevaluating some of the things he said last week when you were gone. Do you see what happens when you take a week off? Oh, hell breaks loose. Two titans go at each other. Here is Elon Musk basically says, I walk back some of the things that he said, some of the tweets that he put out last week. Maybe the Epstein one is one of them. Maybe you wouldn't have won without me.
He deleted it.
Wouldn't have had the Senate. So, and he does not like the big, beautiful bill. I think he's incapable of understanding politics, as bright as he is. Understands the compromise, doesn't understand the art of compromise. That's been a problem with him, but doesn't understand that sometimes you eventually cut spending, but you can't do it on a dime when you have other people that need to get elected in blue districts. He can't. You saw when he blew up the debt ceiling, he had a problem understanding it. And then you see it again.
Well, I think, there was an interesting comment. I know he's had a difficult relationship at times with his father, but his father was commenting on him. I don't know why he was in Moscow, but he was in Moscow, Elon Musk's dad. And he basically said, the way that his mind works, he can't go halfway on things. He doesn't understand the pace of politics, and it will never probably be, that's what he said. And I'm saying it'll never probably be a place where Elon Musk's genius mind allows him to go in terms of being okay with $37 trillion in debt. The other thing is he's looked under the hood now and he sees how much garbage and waste there is in these agencies, and he can't unsee it. So I don't think that his heart is in the wrong place when it comes to what has to be done to get rid of waste and fraud in the government. And I really hope that that they can find a way to continue the work of Doge. And I just think he needed to be out of the White House. He doesn't. He works. His brain works differently. He wants to put people on Mars. And it's going to take longer than we expected are not answers that really make any sense to him. He wants to see some real cuts now, and I understand it. Politics works differently. It's not the way Musk works.
Right. Musk said didn't specify what he'd like to get rid of or take back, but he has deleted the Epstein file comment 2 days after he first posted it. Since then, Musk has shared on X comments made by Trump and Vice President Vance in a positive way. And member Vance said, if we can just calm him down, we think we can bring him
We'd like
back.
to get him back into the fold.
Musk
tweeted a heart emoji
Right.
at President Trump yesterday.
Well, I didn't see that.
And then Trump said today, I believe on Truth Social, I like what he said. That was very nice.
Yeah.
So I think they're working their way back. It'll be a different format of relationship, I would expect, in terms of the government. But Musk, I don't see him going to the Democrat side.
No, there's no way.
He's seen too much. He has seen too much of what government actually looks like.
And also, they targeted him. They're the ones blowing up his cars.
Absolutely.
And not one Republican will buy his cars. But if you tell Donald Trump to jump in a lake and you vilified yourself with the left, who's going to be around to even use Starlink?
I think he's figuring that out.
Back in a moment. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Martha MacCallum's here. The story starts at 3 o'clock. Martha, have you thought about what's going to be on the show?
Not at all.
Really?
You think I should start thinking about it?
A lot of people do. A lot of people pre-think it.
We start thinking about it at 5 o'clock in the morning. So Bill Barr is going to be with us, which I think is going to be really interesting. He has a very interesting take on the president's powers in the California situation. And as we see these protests spreading across the country, there may be other places where this gets tested, and surely it'll be tested in the courts as well. So we'll talk to Bill Barr and a lot more coming up at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is Gavin Newsom says, I'm suing President Trump to get the National Guard out of there, or he should have control of it. And they said, no, we don't see anything there. But if you want, we want to give up until Thursday to argue the case back, because that's what the Department of Justice asked for it. But I'm thinking to myself, I thought it was beyond contention that you're allowed to put the National Guard into the city. The question was, do you have to say the Insurrection Act? There was an insurrection going on. Can you do it with a riot? But I always thought it was the presidential's purview. But it's Justice Breyer's son that is presiding over this. Should that worry Republicans? In theory,
perhaps. But I think that, like I said before, I think that it's the Trump way to basically throw everything at the wall and see how much of it sticks. I think they wanted to take this action. I think they feel like it looks better for them politically, actually, to show some strength. It's the opposite of what we saw in Minneapolis in 2020. And if it calms things down quickly, it could be a formula that we see repeated elsewhere.
So we understand, too, what's happening with the tariffs. Is it okay for President Trump to unilaterally put tariffs on all these people in all these countries? Well, a federal appeal court is allowing Trump's more sweeping tariffs to remain in effect today. Well, it reviews a lower court decision blocking them on grounds that Trump had exceeded his authority. If you want to take leverage out of his hands, you go and say the courts will stop you from doing it. If you're the EU, you might pull back and stop talking now.
But I think that, honestly, I think that, I think that this is the MO, to be super aggressive on all of these fronts and all of these campaign promises, because I think that's what these other countries will see ultimately. And what they see is, although there are some court decisions that have reined him in, most of them have gone his way. So I think if you're an EU negotiator, you got to say to yourself, I'm going to assume that Trump is probably going to be able to prove that he has the authority on this.
I don't know if you're covering this at all, but Simone Biles out of nowhere went after Riley Gaines for going after transgenders in sports. And everyone thought, where did this come from? The blowback was severe to the point where she went out and put out a lengthy statement essentially saying, I want to follow up on my last tweet. I've always believed competitive equity and inclusivity are both essential in sport. The current system doesn't adequately balance these principles, which often leads to frustration and heated exchanges. And it didn't help for me to get personal with Riley, which I apologize for. There were sensitive, complicated issues I truly don't have the answers or solutions to, but I believe it starts with empathy and respect. What do you interpret? She went on for another 20 lines.
I know. And it's a lot of sort of equivocation. It's not a very clear apology, but it is what it is. I think she realized that she had put herself out there in a way that she thought would be universally accepted as the way to go. And I think it came back to bite her. Will Cain is actually also going to be on with me this afternoon because he did an interview with Riley Gaines post the Simone Biles comments. And we're going to get to see some of that today because President Trump was speaking during Will's show yesterday. So you'll get to see that for the first time at 3 o'clock.
Here is Riley Gaines, what she said with Will, cut 40.
How sincere it is, I think, is the real question here. This came about 4 days after she delivered those initial tweets, those 2 tweets that I believe incinerated her entire career. But I will say, nonetheless, I accept the apology. I told you this yesterday. Those personal attacks that she issued back last weekend, they didn't hurt my feelings. That's not what hurt my feelings about her remarks. What hurt me personally about what she chose to tweet out was how she was so willing and so quick to sell out young girls. That is the problem that I had here. Again, this apology seems a bit half-hearted. I have a problem with some of the things she said, including the words and phrases competitive equity and inclusivity. Look, that is not what competition is about. Understand, sports are inherently inclusive. Anyone can play sports, right? But competition, on the other hand, and by its true definition, is exclusive. So I believe that is entirely silly, especially at her level, to advocate for competitive equity. But I accept the apology.
Competitive? What does that mean? Yeah, I don't even know what it means.
I mean, you remember when this whole discussion emerged that equality, which is is steeped in the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, was no longer the word that we're supposed to use. You're supposed to use equity. And I remember there was a little drawing that showed, some 2 kids trying to look over a fence, and they had to put sort of a big block under one to even it out, so they would have equity in their opportunities to succeed. And she's exactly right. Sports is a meritocracy. Winners are the people who can run the fastest or score the most goals, and that's the way sports is. And I think the country is getting back to that mindset after a major setback. And I think that what evens out and makes the country diverse organically, naturally, is when we conduct ourselves on the basis of your merit and your excellence. And I think that's where we need to get back to.
Back to meritocracy.
100%.
All right. So we'll see Martha at 3 o'clock. And keep in mind, too, coming up on June 21st, Martha, you don't have to alter your plans because I know you've been off a week, but I want to put you on the spot. But I'll be in Dayton, Ohio on the 21st with History, Liberty, and Laughs. And then in Dallas, Dayton, Texas on the 23rd. Keep in mind, Dallas is beautiful this time of year, and it doesn't get that hot in Texas in the summer, according to all reports. And then in September 27th in Richmond, Virginia. Just go to BrianKilmeade.com, where Martha spent most of her time.
Absolutely.
On my website. Martha, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Keep it here, Brian Kilmeade Show.